If you are a developer and want to be in another level in your career, you definitely need to understand more about Docker and containers. So in this video, we're going to understand more about Docker, containers, the difference between containers and virtual machines, and so on. So let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome to the Full Cycle channel. My name is Wesley Williams and today we're going to understand more about Docker, containers, virtual machines, Kubernetes, and how you can start with these technologies. But before we go straight to the point, I'd like to ask you, please like this video down below. Don't forget to subscribe and activate your notifications, okay? So let's start talking about Docker and containers. So people, now in my computer, I have just accessed docker.com. But first of all, we need to understand one thing. Docker is a container runtime, is a wonderful tool, but at the same time, Docker is a company. You need to understand this separation. But in order to start with Docker, first of all, you need to understand more about the difference between containers, virtual machines, and the bare metal, the traditional machines that normally we use to work. So in order to do that, let's go to the about us, and we have a very important article that I do recommend that you read, okay? So I'm looking for two important images here. Basically, we have virtual machine architecture and we have containers architecture. Let's start with the virtual machines and then we go to the containers. So with the virtual machine architecture, basically we have infrastructure layer, and after that, on top of that, we have something that we call hypervisor. The hypervisors provides all the support to us to create virtual machines. Basically, virtual machines are machines that we need to provide memory and CPU. Also, you need to install a whole operating system in order to run our virtual machine. So the hypervisor provides all the support. Normally, probably you already heard about VirtualBox, Parallel, VMware. So all of these solutions are hypervisors. And now let's go and start talking about containers and try to understand a little bit the difference between the containers and virtual machines. So when we are talking about containers, we have the infrastructure layer and the main operating system. But on top of that, we have Docker. And Docker changes everything, because with Docker, we can create small processes. And inside these processes, we can run our applications. And the most important part to understand about these processes, they run totally isolated, including all the sources that it's running, and at the same time, the resources of your machine. For example, the CPU, the memory, and so on. And the most important part is that the process, all the processes, they think they are a kind of the whole operating system. But in the reality, all calls that they do basically goes through Docker and goes through the main operating system that they share the main libraries. So that's a very important breakthrough when we are talking about containers. Another thing that we have to consider is, because we are using a very small process, we don't need to install a whole operating system. So if we compare with virtual machines, it's much more like cheaper. And at the same time, you also don't need to maintain a whole operating system like we have in virtual machines. For example, if I have 10 virtual machines, I need to install 10 operating systems. I need to install 10 times the security patches and so on. So we have much more trouble and support that we need to give when you are running using virtual machines. When you have containers, we don't have these problems. So people, that's the main difference. So now that you can understand more about containers, one thing that you need to know is that Docker is not the only solution that we have to run containers. Docker is called container runtime. A container runtime supports all the containers that can run on top of your operating system. However, Docker is also a development tool. When you are using Docker, you are able to build new images. You have network that you can use to communicate between containers. So you have a lot of resources that you can use aside the container runtime. Perfect. So now let's go to the Docker homepage because I need to explain one thing for you. Docker is a Docker is an open source project. But Docker was made to run on top of Linux. So if you have Windows, if you have Mac OS, you need to install a solution called Docker Desktop. This solution is not open source, was created by the Docker company. That's one thing that you need to understand. And this solution can be paid. How is that? So if I go through pricing, you're gonna see that you don't need to pay to use Docker. It's for free, the Docker Desktop. However, if you are working in a big company, the multi-millionaire company, you do need to pay to use Docker. And of course, you have another plans that you can subscribe, but in general, you don't need to pay Docker. Also, you can install Docker Desktop to run on top of Linux because we have additional features that the only Docker, the open source version doesn't have. Right, people? So basically that's the idea when you are talking containers, Docker, and so on. In the next part of this video, we're going to start with Docker, creating our containers, start with your commands, and so on. So let's do that. So people, now on my computer, let's start with the main commands that you need to know to start with Docker. So when you run Docker run hello world, I mean that Docker create a new container using the image called hello world. That's the idea. But we don't have any image in my computer. So we have to pull this image and then start a new container. And we're gonna see this result right now. So as you can see, we have these lines here. That means that Docker didn't find the image in my computer. So now Docker is pulling this image, and now that Docker has the image downloaded, now Docker could start a container. That's it. Basically, that's the idea. However, this container started and right after this stopped running. Why? Because the container just show us this message. That's it, people. That's the main idea about containers. However, when you are running a container, we can have two options basically. The first option is like this example. The container went up, and after to run our program, it goes down because we don't have any process to keep it running. The other option that we have is basically the container goes up and there is a process that can keep the container running. And with this option, we can see our, for example, Nginx running, and we have a lot of other programs that we can keep the container running. That's the main idea. Now, if I run Docker PS, I can see all containers that the Docker has created. However, this Docker PS only shows us the active containers, the containers that are running. And the hello world is not here because hello world is not running anymore. However, if I run Docker PS-A, now I can see the hello world because this container went up and then went down. So basically, I have the container ID. It's just a random ID that we have. The image that this container was based on. The command that this container ran when it started. The time and the status. Here we can see that the container just exited. And now the ports that we are sharing, any port, and the name of the container. Yes, we have this bizarre name here. It's because we didn't set the name of the container when we start, and then Docker just creates a very bizarre name for us, okay? So that's the main idea. So now we run our first container. Also, if I run Docker images, now you can see that I have this image in my computer. My computer has Docker repository images that I can keep it in order to avoid to download every time this image from the Docker registry. Okay, so that's the idea. That's the image name, the tag. Okay, so basically the tag can be the version of the image, and of course the ID when these images was created. In this case, it was 7 months ago, and the size. That's okay. So our first part, I think that you could understand. Now let's start with a little bit more. Let's push it a little bit more. So if I run Docker run -it ubuntu bash. Wesley, oh, it's very complicated. No, it's not. So pay attention. Docker run, okay? So let's start a new container. -it, basically I'm saying, I wanna interact with this container. I wanna go to the command line interface with this container to run commands inside it. Now I have the container, the image name, Ubuntu. And now we have the command that I'm gonna run in this container. So it's the bash. So when I run this option, I'm gonna pull the Ubuntu image, I'm gonna run the bash, and I'm gonna be inside the container using bash. And because I choose the -it, I can type commands on bash here for me. So let's run this command here. So let's go. It's downloading. And now, as you can see, welcome to the Ubuntu. So now you can see that I'm inside the container. I can run commands. If I run uname -a, you can see that I'm running on Linux architecture right now. But it's just a process, folks. Now, in order to see if it's really working, I can put this command, apt update, and you can see that I'm running the apt. Now, apt install vim -y, oops, it's missing an L, okay. Now I'm installing vim here, and now I'm gonna see hello, and hello from my container. That's it, guys. Now I'm inside a Ubuntu machine. That's perfect. So on this, with this option, I'm using bash inside Ubuntu. Now I'm gonna type Ctrl-D, and I'm gonna leave the container. If I run again Docker ps, you're gonna see that I don't have any container running because we left Ubuntu. So if I type Docker ps-a, you're gonna see that we had this Ubuntu running. Perfect, with a bizarre name as well. So but that's it. Now that you could understand more about running a container and typing commands, entering commands inside your container, now we're gonna give a little push. Let's start with this command. Docker run nginx. Nginx is a web server. And if you see, we have the nginx running. And because it's a web server, the process is running. So the container is still running. I'm gonna create a new terminal for me. And now I'm gonna type docker ps, and as you can see, I have the Nginx running for me. And at the same time, you can see that Nginx is using the port 80. And that's a point that I'm gonna say, okay, Wesley, Nginx is using the port number 80, it's running, but how can I access the Nginx? Because you cannot use your 80 port on your machine. Basically, the container has a port opened, but you're not accessing this port from your machine. So if I run, for example, curl localhost, you're gonna see that I don't have any application running or on my 80 port. So how can I use Nginx, and how can I access Nginx from my machine inside a container? That's the question. That's the point that I want to provoke you. So basically, the idea, you can do this. Let's see. I'm gonna run docker run Nginx. However, I'm gonna put this option here called -p. -p is publish. So when I do like 9080, I'm saying that every time when I access the 9000 port, I wanna be redirected to the 80 port from my Nginx. That's the idea. So let's run this. Okay, my Nginx is running, but if I run here docker ps, you're gonna see that I have my localhost on port 9000 pointing to the 80 port of my Nginx. So basically, if I run now curl localhost 9000, we're gonna receive the hello, welcome to Nginx. Let's open here 9000, welcome to the Nginx. So that's the point that I'm gonna show you. You can run a container and you can access from your machine the application that is running in your container. Now, I wanna change this welcome to Nginx. How can I do this? So, in order to do that, I need to access this container. To start a new container, I already showed you. Basically, you run docker run. But now I want to apply a command in my container in order to access it. How can I do this? Basically, I'm gonna get the name of the container. Let me copy it. And I'm gonna run docker exec. So it's the different command. Remember, to start a new container, you need to run docker run. To run a command in a container, you need to run docker exec. So docker exec -it, the name of the container, and then bash. Now I'm inside the container, and let's access the Nginx page. So we have usr, share, Nginx, HTML, and if you see, we have this HTML file, the index.html. Now, how can I change this content? Basically, when I run apt update, now apt install vim-y, I'm going to install my favorite editor, and now I'm going to run index.html, and let's change it. Welcome to the full cycle. Yes. Now let's access and refresh the page, and we have our first update in our container. So that's the idea how you can change the containers when you are working with Docker. However, there's a very important thing that you need to understand. Every time you create a new container, this container will pull an image. And this image just doesn't change. There is an immutability principle when you create an image. So when I'm running this container, and I did a update here, like I made this update using welcome to the full cycle. If I remove this container and if I create a new container based on Nginx image, I will have welcome to Nginx again, and all updates that I've done on this container will be lost. Wow, Wesley, but how can I use containers and how can I use these containers to creating new solutions? If every time when I remove the container, I will lose everything. So that's the point that you need to understand when you are talking about Docker. Docker has an incredible feature that we can share a folder in your machine through the container. Let's do this. So let's stop this container here. Okay. So if I type docker ps, I don't have any container running. Now I'm gonna run docker run -p 9080 and -v, that's a volume. And with this volume, I'm gonna share a volume from my machine through the container. So basically, I'm gonna put pwd because it's the absolute path from my machine. If you are using Windows, you can put the whole URL, okay? And /HTML. Now I'm gonna put the path to the HTML folder on Nginx. So basically is /usr share Nginx HTML. So when I run my application now, basically Docker will create a HTML folder in my machine, and everything that I create inside this folder will reflect on our container. So now I'm gonna put Nginx and let's run. Okay, our Nginx is running. But now when I come here, you're gonna see that we have the HTML folder, but it's empty. So now I'm gonna create an index.html. It's not doc type. I wanna do the whole file. And now I'm gonna put welcome to full cycle. Okay, so now let's see. I'm gonna refresh this page, and you can see that we have welcome to full cycle. Now, doesn't matter if I kill this container, because every time when I create a new container sharing this folder, I will still have these files. And is that the way that normally you work with Docker during your journey with your code, with your projects? So now you could understand the main points of Docker. So basically, we can exit the container, we can update the container, we can share folders, and we also can publish reports that we can access the container from our machine. However, we start talking a lot about images, and I know that images for you now, it's maybe can be a kind of abstracted thing, because we didn't create an image actually. We just used images from the Docker Container Registry. Wesley, where is the Docker Container Registry? Docker has a website called Docker Hub. Let's see the Docker Hub here. So here, Docker Hub, if you access, and now I'm gonna type here Nginx, for example. If you see, let me zoom in, I have the Docker official image here for Nginx. And there's a lot of versions of Nginx with different operating system. So basically, every time when I run Nginx, Docker run Nginx, Docker will pull the Nginx image with the latest version for us. Every option that we have here is a tag of this image. That's the point that you need to understand. What's your goal, our goal here now? I want to create our own image based on the Nginx, giving us this result that is the welcome to full cycle. Okay? How can we do this? We have to build our image. How can I build an image? Basically, I'm gonna create a file called Docker file. Docker file is a kind of recipe that he used to create our images. So basically, every time when we start with the Docker file, you need to say which image you're gonna be based on. So basically, if I put from Nginx latest, I'm saying that the image that I'm gonna create will use as base the Nginx image here. Now, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna copy our HTML index.html file to this folder of our image. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm changing the base image that we are working. Okay? Now that we have this result, I'm gonna say which command that I'm gonna use to run Nginx. And this is the command that Nginx needs to run the web server and keep the process working. As you can see here, we have this option, daemon off. Why? Because if the daemon was on, the image, our container will just exit. With daemon off, this image is gonna be like running and keep our container running. Okay? So now how can we create our own image? Basically, we're gonna do this command, docker build -t. My namespace on Docker Hub is Wesley Williams. Now, I'm gonna choose the name of our image. It's gonna be like full cycle Nginx image. Okay? I'm gonna put the version, it's latest, and now I need to choose which folder. I'm gonna inform to Docker build which folder we have the Docker file. Basically, we are in the same folder, so I'm gonna put just this dot here. Now, let's build our image. Okay, perfect. Our image is already created. How can I know that this image is working? So basically, what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna run docker run -p 9080 Wesley Williams -Nginx img latest. And now it's working. I'm gonna update, and you can see that we have the welcome to full cycle. In your machine, if you run this exactly command right now, you're gonna have the very same result. How so? Because I'm gonna publish this image on Docker Hub. How can I do this? Docker push image name, and now Docker is just putting all files that it needs to work. If I go to my Docker Hub and let me sign in, you're gonna see that I have my new image here, Wesley Williams FC Nginx img. So if you run the very same command that I've just show you, now you can reproduce exactly what I did. Okay? People, I know that we have much more to talk about Docker. However, I think this, how can I say? For you, it's just the beginning, okay? So start practicing, use Docker. Docker for me, it's like Git, you just need to know. You have to, if you want to be in another level in your career, you definitely should learn Docker, okay? And if this video, okay, helped you in some way, please like this video, subscribe in our channel, and activate the notifications, okay? So thank you very much for seeing this video, and until the next one. Bye bye.